they could have picked beautiful Santa Monica or Florida. They picked Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I grew up. And we were poor. We did not speak English well. We lived in the basement of a person's home, and it was cold. We go to flea markets and sell gifts and jewelry to make ends meet. We did that for several years, moved to an apartment, opened a store in a shopping center. It was a gift store. Saved some more money, and then over a few more years, opened one store in a shopping mall. And then my brother and I would help watch that store because we were free labor. And then eventually we expanded to 6 stores. And so in my mind, my parents achieved the American dream. They went from being poor to a home, gave my brother and I an amazing education. I went to Stanford and Georgetown. And it's the reason I joined the US Air Force on active duty. I believe I can never give back to America everything this amazing country has given to me and my family. One reason I choose to remain in the reserves, I'm a Lieutenant Colonel at Los Angeles Air Force Base in El Segundo in the district. And it's one reason I'm in politics, make sure that this dream remains open for people who want to work hard and succeed. After I served active duty in the Air Force, I went into private practice at a law firm. Then I went to a financial services company. I was elected to Torrance City Council in 2002, State Assembly in 2005, and State Senate in 2011. And to understand why I'm running for Congress, let me take you down memory lane about 5 or 6 years ago, when many of us in California were facing the exact same issues that America is facing today. We had deep political gridlock. We had a budget deficit of over $40 billion. Our unemployment was in double digits, and we were on the verge of a government shutdown. But we didn't do that. We worked together with Democrats and Republicans, with the governor and with the state constitutional officers, made some incredibly difficult decisions, and stabilized the state of California in 2008. We came back again in 2009, did that again, provided a foundation on which to grow. Now we've got a $2 billion surplus. We've reinvested in education, our social safety net. Our unemployment is the lowest in nearly 5 years, and it's very clear our best days are yet to come. And those are sort of the experiences and leadership I can take to our nation's capital. And if you look at what this race is, it is for a legislative opening in a partisan bicameral system. And I'm a legislator in a bipartisan bicameral system. And if you look at my record, I've authored numerous complex pieces of legislation through the legislature, through both houses, signed by both Republican and Democratic governors into law. Specifically to the bill that was referenced earlier today, I oppose it. It's authored by Senator Lieu. I wrote an op-ed in the Santa Monica Press opposing it. I've also talked to her and go, hey, of all the things you want to cut, why are we doing this? And by the way, we have a surplus, so I don't understand what you're doing. The bill currently is in the Assembly. Hopefully it doesn't get out of there, but if it comes back to the Senate, I will vote no on it. But my hope is it just gets stuck. And it's good what you're doing now to sign petitions and to get that to her as well. With that, I'll happy to answer any questions, but I think maybe other folks will speak first and answer questions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lieu. And right on time, the perfect segue. You couldn't have timed it better. I think we're going to go on the air with this show. Boy, cut to Wendy Greuel, everybody. Please welcome our past mayoral candidate. And the controller, wasn't it?
Yes,
and weren't you a city council person also?
I was.
And city council person, Wendy Greuel. So if you'd like to take 5 minutes or so to introduce yourself,
Okay,
tell us what you're about, and then we're going to do Q&A after we have our other candidate.
Okay. Somebody sitting here. Did you want to go and have that other candidate go ahead before me?
No,
Is
that's
all right?
fine. We respect.
Take a deep breath. Okay.
Right,
I
take
can
a
go
deep
with the
breath.
flow. So it seems to me we have a traffic problem, right? That's what you
Yes.
get. Just a slight one in Los Angeles. Anyways, I'm so happy to be here and so happy to see all of you on a Friday afternoon to talk about the future of this country and the future of this community. We all know that our wonderful Congressman Waxman was an incredible gentleman, still is, was an icon. When you think about 40 years of what he's been able to do, how many of you voted for him for 40 years? Okay, so you're telling your age, I know, me too. I'm not quite, I haven't voted for 40 years for that. But I think when we think about what he was able to do as a Congress member and the fact that he's going to have big shoes to fill, everything from the Affordable Care Act that we have today, talking about health care, to the Clean Air Act, to generic drugs that are now available because of him, to the fact we have baby formula that now has rules about what is included in there. He is someone who has fought for all of us. As I would say, he has fought and delivered. He has fought on the issues of climate change and the environment. And most importantly, as a controller and someone who has taken on special interests and been tough, he also was one of those that stood up to those special interests. How many of you remember that iconic picture of all of those tobacco industry raising their hands and saying, you know, tobacco was not addictive? And I think one of my favorite stories about Henry Waxman was when he said, he asked them about it, and one of them responded, well, Twinkies are addictive too. And he said, well, there's one big difference between Twinkies and smoking, death, just a small thing. So he took on those issues, and I decided I wanted to run for Congress because I didn't want to have anything, a misstep, a gap in what we were able to do, and have someone who could fight and deliver in Washington, D.C. So let's talk about some of the things that are important to us as a Congress member. First and foremost, it is about thinking of our environment. When you think about our environment, and the fact is, it's not just about what is right and climate change. A lot of times people eyes close over when you talk about climate change. But what it is about our economy as well, and it also is about the future for our children. I have a 10-and-a-half-year-old. I want him to be able to breathe the air that we have. And I want to make sure that we continue the efforts of the Markey Waxman bill. I want to make sure that we push forward on the issue of climate change. But it's also about ensuring that we have a future for our seniors. When you think about some of the challenges that people are taking on, not only our Medicare and Social Security, we made a contract with people. We made a contract that Social Security would be there when we get old. I know I'm old enough now to get my Social Security notice that it tells me how much I have and what I will have when I get old enough to collect that Social Security. I want to make sure it's there for me so my son doesn't have to work the rest of his life to take care of his mom. And I want to make sure that we have a Medicare system that's providing the health care that is necessary. But it's also, for me, another issue that is important is about traffic and transportation and our quality of life. I've heard from so many people, they say to me, I can't go visit my child or my grandchild because the traffic is so bad, forget it, I'm not going to leave here. And I'll tell you today, I'm not excited about leaving here at 3:30 to get where I need to go after this, because the traffic is horrific. And Henry Waxman was a fighter, and I'm so proud to be part of Measure R, the development of Measure R here in Metro, which is where it started, was thinking about how we ensure that we have a transportation system that works. And they went to Washington, D.C. and said, we're going to make sure that not only do we have the money here in Measure R, but we have the funds available on the federal level. And Henry Waxman pushed through the change that allowed for the money to be used, federal money to be used, to create that public transportation system here. It's critically important for our quality of life. It's critically important for our ability for the city to be. But one of the other things I want to talk about is about income inequality. Because right now, there's the haves and the have-nots. We're losing our middle class. We're losing the kind of things that people don't have the ability to actually afford where they live. We have women who are still making, I know this is shocking to you, but 78 cents on the dollar. I met a little girl the other day who was 11 years old, and she had a brother. And I said, so do you think it's okay that you're going to make 78 cents and he's going to make $1 when you go to work? She said, no. Is that true? I said, in some instances it's not all the time in good places, but the statistics show that they don't always make the same, and having the parity is very important. We need to have affordable preschool. Guess what? The studies also show that if you don't have the kind of opportunities from that 0 to 5, it's everything you learned, that book that was everything you learned in kindergarten, everything you learn in that 0 to 5 is so critically important. And universal preschool is critical. My principals that I visited when I was a city council member said to me, we know which kids who start kindergarten, which ones have had preschool and which ones have not. And they are behind from day one. And so I think it's important, and I've probably gone over my 5 minutes, but I get kind of excited, that when we think about the future of this country, and we think about who's going to be the next Congress member, you want someone who's going to be a fighter and a deliverer for all of you. Whether it's seniors, whether it is our children, whether it is our environment, whether it is education, whether it is job creation, you want someone who's going to be able to go through that maze. Now I know that going in as a minority freshman is going to be a tough thing, getting legislation, but I know how to do that. But it's also about ensuring how you find your way through the bureaucracy and to get it done. And I'll give you one story before I finish. I'm very proud that I worked for the Department of Housing and Urban Development under the Clinton administration. And part of my job was the regional director for Southern California, and actually did a lot after the 1994 earthquake that impacted this region. And I did a lot on homelessness. But I remember when I was the regional director, I had a group come to me, the Greater Los Angeles Association for the Deaf, GLAD. And they have a facility out in Eagle Rock. And they came to me and they said, we applied for funds to be able to develop the second and third floor for housing for the deaf, and particularly for the elderly. But we found out after we applied that the regulation said you have to have a new building. It can't be a rehabilitation of a building. And we are going to lose this entire program because of that. And it's millions of dollars from the state, from the feds, and from the banks that they had a loan with. And so they came to me, is there anything you can do? I said, well, let me talk to the assistant secretary and the general counsel, and I brought them out. I said, I want you to see this. I want you to see this facility so when you make a decision, you realize what impact that decision will have if you give the wrong decision. And they came out, and guess what? They said, we have an idea. We will have a separate entrance to the second and third floor, and that will allow us to call it a new facility. And now we have a facility there that has housing for the deaf. It's the same whether it is senior housing, it's the same whether there's programs with AIDS, and that my history, whether it was working for Tom Bradley or for the Clinton administration or DreamWorks or being an elected official, is to fight and deliver. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to having your questions today, and looking forward to working with all of you for this region and our community. Thank you very, very much.
We have a terrific candidate with this as an independent, which is important for the balance in our society. Please welcome Marianne Williamson.
Yay! Thank you very, very much. The purpose and the meaning of this college, I relate to very personally. When people have asked me why I decided to run this race, what I say is that I turned 60 last year, and that 60 is the age at which you say to yourself, well, if there's anything I thought I might do someday, this is the time to think about doing it. And I wrote a book about conscious aging in this country. There's a woman named Lydia Bronte who talked about this topic and how Americans had put so many more years onto our lifespan, and how it's a very, very different time and a very, very different mentality that we have once we reach middle age and beyond in the United States today. I was reading an article in the paper that fascinated me about a bunch of brain scientists who met at, I think, MIT or Harvard or someplace like that. And they were all specialists on the brain, on Alzheimer's, and on memory loss. And they were dealing with a fascinating theory. And that theory had to do with some brain scientists and neurologists who said that they didn't think all memory loss was devolutionary. That they didn't think all brain loss was that something is going wrong. But there was this theory among all these fancy scientists that some brain loss had to do with the fact that the brain had evolved, and had evolved to a place where it didn't need to hear any more details because it knew the pattern, right? So it dropped certain details because it knew already what it needed to know. And so these brain scientists were all excited. They went, this is like fascinating. We've got to come up with a name for this. This is amazing. All of a sudden the article, I read this in the New York Times, all of a sudden everybody in the room got quiet because everybody at the same time knew what the word for that was. Wisdom. Yeah. And one person said it, wisdom. And I'm running for Congress because our government today is unwise. I'm running today because I believe that the behavioral patterns of the US government are so profoundly reckless and so profoundly irresponsible as to represent the dismantling of our democratic foundation. I am running for Congress because moneyed forces, particularly since the Supreme Court McCutcheon case decision as of yesterday, one of the greatest perversions of American democracy in our history, has now created a situation of such legalized corruption and bribery that moneyed forces wield an influence on the behavior of our US government completely disproportionate to the influence that is wielded by the average citizen. And those among us who are wise must act now. It's not enough to just address the effects of our problems anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We must address the cause. It's not enough to just address the symptoms anymore. We must address the disease. You know, I want to say something about Wendy Greuel and Ted Lieu, both of whom I have great respect for. And I am honored, actually, to be here with you guys. There is a difference of opinion, which is good. This is democracy. This is how it should be. But I see some things differently. Ted, you said you wanted to protect the ability of Americans to experience the American dream that your family has. Well, I want to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. The way I see it, too many millions of Americans already are locked out of that dream. Yes. And I'll tell you something else. This issue of protecting the environment, can we talk about the real situation here, which is as long as the oil and gas companies are able to dominate the policies the way they are, we will not be able to adequately address climate change. Yes. And as long as the chemical companies and the big agricultural companies are able to dominate policies the way they are, we will not be able to deal with GMOs and herbicides and pesticides in our food supply. And as long as the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies are able to dominate our policies the way they are, we will never have health insurance companies. So there are a lot of candidates here, but there are two conversations. My conversation, democracy is in big trouble, and the wise among us need to do something. We need to stand. This should not be among those of us who are a certain age in the United States. Absolutely, as I'm sure like Ted and Wendy, I'm sure we all agree on how important it is to protect Medicare and how important it is to protect Social Security and such things like that. I'm sure we all agree on this. But I'm interested in more than just getting the interests of older people in the United States taken into account. I want the consciousness and the wisdom of the older people in the United States taken into account. People who are very aware. You don't just mess with the Gettysburg Address. You don't mock this of the people, by the people, and for the people, and turn it into of a few of the people, and by a few of the people, and for a few of the people, and expect us to be silent. Because like the abolitionists, and like the women's suffragettes, and like the civil rights movement before us, you mess with democracy, you're messing with us. We have some things to say. Senator Washington, I'll say it for you. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask each of you to make, and as you know, let's say the US and China together release 50% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions. China is now ahead of the US. So the US and China would need to get together and team up to be leaders in the world in making these reductions. And as you know, the climate scientists, as is projected by the IPCC recent report, if we reach a tipping point at which the temperature goes up enough that we start thawing the tundra in Siberia and releasing vast amounts of methane, we're going to lose total control of our climate. And temperatures will keep climbing with enormously destructive effects. So, the question I'd like to ask each of you to make a brief statement about what you would advocate that Congress can do to make drastic reductions in the rate at which we are releasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and to induce China and then the rest of, if the US and China make big strides, the rest of the world will follow.
Essential issue for humanity. And in California, we've done some amazing things in terms of climate change. I was a co-author of Assembly Bill 32, the landmark Global Warming Solutions Act. We took on the oil companies, we took on big business, and we won. And we said that industries by 1990, or had to go to pre-1990 levels in terms of greenhouse gases by 2020. And I'm running for Congress because it's very clear to me that we can do everything we want in California and it won't matter very much. We need America to get on board with what California has done. And then we need America to get other countries to get on board with what California has done. If you elected to Congress, I would spend day and night trying to replicate AB 32 nationwide.
A couple things. One, we need a national carbon reduction goal. And there's been a lot of talk about a carbon tax. There's been a lot of talk about making sure that we are identifying exactly how that is going to happen and to be able to pass the laws that will make it. I will push forward on the Waxman Markey bill and push that so we can get it actually passed. Internationally, we have not done a good enough job. We have not said we are part of the solution across this country. And I think when you look at when AB 32 was passed and then AB 23, or the Proposition 23 that was trying to come in and the oil companies put a lot of money into it, people said, oh, you'll never be able to fight that. We did. One of the things I'm proud is that there was a League of California Cities that said, well, we're gonna maybe support this Proposition 23. And I pretty much said over my dead body and went to that meeting and led the effort to say we are not going to do that because this is too important. We cannot continue to subsidize the oil companies. We can, in this state of California right now, we're the only one that doesn't even have taxes on the oil companies that are drilling in the state of California, which we could use for the kinds of things that are necessary to address climate change. I'm going to Congress because I've led the effort in Los Angeles in reviewing the 20% by 2010 and called it what it was, just luck that they got to that level. We haven't done enough. We need to be able to look at everything and be a leader in this world, and be able to look at some of the things EU has done, and I think the United States of America could do a better job, and I plan to do that in Congress.
My response to both of the things that have been said is that they're very good, but good luck with all of that. Can we be real here? If you ask me what we can do in Congress, what I would do is everything in my power to magnify the voice around passage of a constitutional amendment outlawing the undue influence of money on our politics and establishing that corporations do not have the rights of personhood. Until that is done, America has no dearth of geniuses, and a lot of them are right here in our neighborhood. America has no dearth of great ideas. We have a Commerce Committee in Washington who won't even allow testimony by scientists. The dysfunction, the rot, ladies and gentlemen, the cancer that's eating our democracy is so great that we can talk about all these things that good people are going to fight for. Yeah, really? Really? Can we talk about the actual landscape in Washington today that has to do with the dominance by the oil and gas companies? And so the way things are, see, we as Americans, it's really interesting. We need to disenthrall ourselves from the way we've been mesmerized into asking for a little bit here and a little bit there. We are Americans. We ask for the whole thing. It's called democracy. It's what the people of the United States would want and what would serve the people of the United States and the world. We are on a perilous track when it comes to the environment. The whole issue of climate change, the debate should be over. This is a clear and present danger. But until we deal with the real cause of the problem and the real disease itself, all of these other things that people are going to fight for, let's get real. And those of us who at a certain time in our lives are ready to get real. What I will do if I'm elected is take it as a mandate to amplify the conversation both in Congress and outside of Congress, getting this constitutional amendment on the boards. It's not easy to amend the US Constitution, and it shouldn't be. But it took an amendment to abolish slavery. It took an amendment to give women the right to vote. It will take an amendment to the US Constitution to get the money out of politics so that the oil and the gas companies aren't just laughing at everything we're talking about today. Thank you.
This is question number 2 out of 5.
I'm a libertarian, just to give you a slight background here. Okay, I have 2 major issues. One, in economics, there's something called zero-sum game or growing the economy. I listened last week, I listened this week, and none of you have said anything about even beginning to understand we need to grow the economy. New York has high taxes, California has high taxes, people are leaving. California Pizza Kitchen, a big company, no longer operates new facilities in California. Why? It'll take them 2 years to get the permits at about $500,000. They moved to Texas. They can open a new facility in about 2 weeks. None of you has said a word about reducing regulation to grow the economy. And I'm not talking about government paying employees. Government does not create jobs. I'd like to hear what you want to do to grow the economy without raising taxes or creating more debt. Okay, thank you.
Sure. I do hope the next question we reverse the sequence.
Okay.
So one of the ways that we now have a $2 billion surplus in California is because we grew the economy. And we did that through a number of things that we've done. We changed the tax structure with enterprise zones, for example. So an enterprise zone is a geographic district, and there are multiple enterprise zones in California. And what would happen is a company would go there, and then they would get a tax credit of up to $37,000 per employee. But it didn't matter if this was a company that manufactured satellites, or if it was a restaurant that sold hot dogs, or if it was a strip club. It got the same tax credit. And we looked at it and thought, this is dumb, because geographic locations don't compete, industries do. And in addition, companies who move from one part of California to another one take advantage of these tax credits, not benefiting the state. So we changed it, and we did it on a bipartisan basis, and now we gave incentives to manufacturers who manufacture in California. We gave tax incentives to biotech companies who do R&D, and then we also gave the governor's office a pot of money to try to attract and retain and grow businesses. So it used to be the governor of Texas would come to California and go, come to Texas, and by the way, here's a package of incentives we can give you. All the governor of California could do was come to California, we're great, and that was it. Now the governor can actually offer a package of incentives. So I'm moving along those lines, but you're right. The best way to fund the priorities that the three of us here care about is to grow the economy.
Excellent question. One of the things I'm most proud of as a city council member was business tax reform in the city of Los Angeles. We were losing businesses left and right. Led the effort to reduce business tax overall by 15%. 60% of the businesses no longer paid business tax. And if you were a new business when you came into the city at that time, you also didn't pay business tax for those first 2 years. Because if you can grow your economy, it shows that wealth actually increases and the number of businesses. Absolutely. We have a Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which is 46% of the goods movement for the entire country goes through those two ports. 82% for the state of California. One of the things I looked at was, are we being competitive enough? With the opening of the Panama Canal, are we going to be able to still have those goods movements come for that, and the jobs that are being created, and the jobs along the way that go through the Alameda corridor? We have to focus in what are the jobs of the future. We have an entertainment industry that we are losing, we are hemorrhaging, that are going other places. New York is cleaning our clock on that. The tax incentives that have been forward need to be increased to be able to keep those jobs here. These are clean economic jobs here. And it's not just the people who are in front of the camera. It's the people in back of the camera. It is the people who are the dry cleaners and the florists and everyone else who is part of that. The restaurants as well. We can just look at some of the times where there was the writer's strike and how many people lost their jobs or weren't able to survive. That's an industry. When you look at that, New York, I would say New York would never let Wall Street leave, although they probably should have at some point. But Los Angeles shouldn't let Hollywood leave. It is our signature industry. We have to fight for the industries that are important. Biotech. City of Santa Monica has been very good in Silicon Beach in creating the environment that a lot of people want to be part of that. In Congress, what I want to be able to do is to create that same kind of environment and make sure that the jobs are here. We have transportation dollars that are coming to this region. Lots, billions of dollars, again, thanks to Henry Waxman and others. But the money that is coming in, guess what? If there's one federal dollar in that, one federal dollar, you cannot have priority to hire people from this region. Even though a majority of the money is coming from the taxes that you all pay. So I proposed, and when they look at the surface transportation bill this next year, that it should include that if the government of that area is taxing themselves to provide for transportation, that the federal government shouldn't hold us back from being able to have local jobs. The last part of it I want to answer is, the future of our country depends on an educated workforce. It shouldn't depend on the zip code of what kind of education you get. Everyone should have the same opportunity to succeed, like all of us. I went to public school. How many of you went to public school? Okay, see? If you ask a room today, not the same. My son goes to public school and I'm proud of that. But let me tell you, it's not easy. And I want to make sure that everyone has that same opportunity to succeed and to be able to get a college education, to be able to get job training if that's the course that they want to be able to go, and to make sure that they're not paying off this debt for the rest of their life. Those are the kinds of things that I believe I can do as a Congress member. I don't believe that the glass is half empty. I know there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of things that we need to fix. And I was out there when the Citizens United campaign and when the Supreme Court made their decision, I was out there trying to get businesses, even though it was the letter of the law that we couldn't require them. But with the mayor of New York, current mayor of New York, we went and talked to people all over the country, businesses say, we want you to voluntarily not do this. Now, we were successful in some and others we were not. But to use the voice that I have the experience to make those changes, and yes, to grow our economy, but make sure we have an educated workforce for the future, and that we have the jobs of the future here in this region. That's what I'm going to do in Congress.
I agree with the things that Ted and Wendy have said here, but I have to tell you, I come from Houston, Texas. So I'm not going to stand here as a California citizen and go on and on about how great Texas is compared to us and the economy or anything. But I'll tell you something, sir. Even though it is true what you're saying, that there need to be more tax incentives and other things that will help the economy grow here, a lot of the pro-business policies in Texas are at the expense of millions of people who live there and the lives that they live. So I'm not like, oh, let's just make it easy for business, let's just make it easy for business. It's more complicated. And one of the ways it's more complicated is exactly what Wendy has said, starting with what she said earlier about preschool. I believe that the single greatest thing we can do to grow the economy is to prepare more American young people to be robust job creators themselves. What Wendy was saying earlier was so important about preschool. We know that it is the single greatest poverty alleviator. These children, as Wendy was saying, who did not go to preschool, start kindergarten, day one behind. If we don't catch them up in their reading within 2 years, they're on a 50% probability track to incarceration. What you got here is a lockout of too many American people from the US economy. Wendy continued with the conversation, correctly so, all the way up to college. We used to have the greatest university system in the country. It has been devastated. That's how you have a robust economy. You have young people going in there with the skill sets, with the education, with the hope. The hope. Look, the average American young person, college graduate today, gets out of college with a $30,000 average student loan debt. And the banks have made it, and the government has allowed them to make it so that these kids can't get out of that debt even with bankruptcy. So we should be making it easier for the American young person to get an education, not otherwise, and exactly the way that Wendy was talking about. Otherwise, what you're doing, like we're doing with so many other resources in this country, putting them into the hands of a very few. You want a great economy in California and in America, the way I see it, you see every baby born here as a potential genius. You give them preschool, you give them the best education in the world, you give them the best, also as Wendy mentioned, the best matrix of technical schools. You make it easy for them to go to college, easy for them to get an education, and also you demonstrate a society that is returned to the foundations of brotherhood and justice, which make America great to begin with. So they have hope, so that they're not desperate, and so that they have a reason again to feel that their skills and their energy and their genius contributing to this beautiful country is worthwhile and a reason for them to live. Until then, we will continue with what we've got, and as long as you've got an economy in which through tax policies, trade policies, and banking policies, so much of our resources go into the hands of a very, very few. We've been doing it for years. It doesn't work. You're not going to have a robust economy that way because it's not something that emanates from the angels of our better nature. Do right by people. You'll have a great economy.
Yeah.
It's so discouraging that the Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court just passed, it's so discouraging. And you know, you listen to NPR and all those radio stations, and you know, they deal with it now as if it's a foregone conclusion. You know, Sheldon Adelson will do this, will do that. My question to you is, what can you do as an individual senator? It seems like, you know, we're drowning, and it's so discouraging. It feels like I just want to curl up into a little prenatal baby. What can you do as an individual senator in Congress?
Thank you. Marianne.
The first thing I would do in Congress is what I've done here on this panel. Mention it. Can we stop ignoring this elephant that's on the table? So that's number one. I feel that I can help magnify the voices. There are people in Congress. Al Franken is onto this. Sherrod Brown is onto this. Some people in Congress as well. But we've got to magnify this voice. Also, what I feel that I believe gives added value that I feel that I can contribute to this if you give me this opportunity. This has been acknowledged. My endorsement I got from Keith Ellison, who is a co-chair of the Progressive Caucus in the House of Representatives. When asked why he supports me, this was his answer. He feels that I can help broaden the base around this. I'm a popularizer. and I have a national audience. And I feel we need to awaken more Americans to the very, very sinister thing that has occurred here with the McCutcheon case. This is a direct assault on democracy, ladies and gentlemen. This is a direct assault on democracy. You know, they say that the devil's in the details. When it comes to American politics today, the devil's not in the details, the devil's in the big picture. It is the de-democratization of the United States of America. Former Supreme Court, late Supreme Court Louis Brandeis said, you can have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a very few, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. The cap has currently been lifted. Instead of an individual being able to give across the board during a campaign season, $123,000 in all to parties and people, PACs, etc., they can now give over $5 million. So you're right. It's been given to Sheldon Adelson, it's been given to the Koch brothers, and so forth. We need a constitutional amendment. We need a national movement. You kept asking me, what can one person do? Not that much. But we need a lot of people saying this, and I believe that my victory in this campaign, because it is a race being very watched closely on a national basis, will inspire a lot of people around this country to run on this issue, the underlying issue, getting the money out of politics, a constitutional amendment. You have 18 of those in the House of Representatives. You're going to watch America on the move.
As I said earlier, I'm a gal that says the glass is half full. So I was devastated by this decision, and devastated by the decision where Citizens United said a corporation can be considered a person. I don't know about you, but I've lived long enough. That to me just seems bizarre and untrue, and it was a horrible decision. And that decision is billions of dollars that are going into campaigns across this country. Just a few weeks ago, the women senators that are running across all over this country came to Los Angeles, and they were on a tour to help raise money to get reelected and help others. They were thinking they were going to raise $750,000 on this trip. That day, Koch brothers wrote a $750,000 check against one of them that we're seeing. That is corruption of our political system. And so we need clean money campaigns. And let me tell you, they're short-term and long-term. There is the use of our bully pulpit and standing up and saying enough is enough, and transparency and asking every candidate to say exactly where the money came from, when, and have that available as quickly as possible. But it's also about our Supreme Court. Who made these decisions? People on the Supreme Court. Who appoints those Supreme Court? A president. We're going to have an opportunity in a couple of years, and I know who I want to vote for, but we have to make sure that we have people who are going to be President of the United States who will appoint the right kind of Supreme Court justices that are going to stand up for those of us that don't have the corporate voice. And so it will take both. It's clean money campaigns at each, and I've supported them not only here locally and talked about it as a council member on who can raise money and who can't, and ban commissioners from fundraising because I believe that was corrupting the system as well. But I think most of all it means getting a different kind of Supreme Court and working on that level as well as what we're doing here today.
So I'm going to answer the question, and then I'm going to do a close, if that's okay, because I got to go and leave that. Marianne is absolutely right on campaign finance reform, and it's a phenomenally important issue. One thing we can do, right, is really fight for a constitutional amendment. And so I'm authoring Senate Bill 1272, which will put a ballot measure on in November that asks voters of California to make a decision on whether they want to overturn Citizens United. It will be a referendum. And the point of that is, if we can get 3/4 of the states in America to also do the same thing, that sends a very powerful message to Washington, D.C., saying if you do a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, the states will be with you. The bill was sponsored by Movie Money Out, Voters In, and that's something that we can do to try to force a constitutional amendment to happen. In terms of the McCutcheon decision, it was a follow-on to Citizens United. Just to understand what the decision meant a couple days ago. Before this decision, Speaker Boehner, for example, could go to Republican donor Sheldon Adelson and say, hey, I want you to give me money. And then Sheldon would be limited to $76,400 to give to the Republican Party, which is still a lot of money. But this decision basically removed all the aggregate limits. It benefited one class of citizen, billionaires and multimillionaires who give lots of money. And now the speaker can go to Sheldon Adelson and say, I want $3.5 million. given. So it is phenomenally bad for democracy is what happened. And the hope is that we can overturn this through a constitutional amendment. So let me close. Let me first thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm very honored to be here. And I want you to sort of think about skill sets and what this position is all about. It never happens that as a legislator you say, I want X to happen. I'm going to fight for X, and it happens. What happens is you have to deal with a majority of your colleagues. You have to work on a bipartisan basis. You have to get it through a policy committee, through a fiscal committee in your house, then repeat it in the other house, then get the executive branch to sign off on it. And I have a track record of passing complex landmark legislation. And I'll give you 2 examples. When I was in the Assembly, I was chair of banking. And I was made chair of banking, and then a few months later, foreclosure data comes in, and it's not looking very good. So I talked to these banks and their CEOs, and I said, explain this to me. And they say, oh, this is just a blip, don't worry about it. So I didn't worry about it. I said, okay. Another 3 more months pass, data gets worse. I ask them the same question, they give me the same answer, and then I conclude either they're misleading me or they don't know what they're talking about. So I started doing hearings on these banks and brokerage houses, and if you think about Countrywide, they didn't have a bad reputation 10 years ago. And so we called them into this hearing, and I can guarantee you this conversation never occurred at Countrywide. When you think about how you buy a home, you give very private financial information to Countrywide or to a bank. And then a few days later, they'll call back and either deny the loan or they'll say, you know, you've been approved. Well, Countrywide never said to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, congratulations, we've approved you for your loan. We know that you can pay the first 2 years of your 1% teaser rate. We know on year 3, when it jumps to 10%, you're going to default. And we don't care, we're giving you this loan anyways. That conversation never occurred, but in fact, that's what was happening. Because Countrywide got the commission pretty quickly. They didn't care if the homeowner defaulted 3 years later. They didn't sow these loans upstream to Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. That's why those firms no longer exist. And that nearly collapsed our entire economy. So I authored legislation to stop that in California. I put in some very basic rules that said, you can't give a loan to someone if you think they're going to default. You can't give someone a higher interest rate loan because you get a higher commission. And you have to treat your clients as fiduciaries, the same way attorneys treat their clients, the same way CPAs treat their clients. And when I introduced this bill, it was opposed by a banking lobby. I couldn't even get it through the legislature the first time I tried it. Second time I tried it, I got it through the legislature, it was vetoed by the governor. Third time I tried it, the Republican governor signed it. And then I was rewarded with being taken out as chair of banking. It's still a very powerful industry. But we put in reforms years before Congress acted. And then recently, I'm very proud in terms of climate change, the first question, as a result of Senate Bill 1066 that I authored, $3 million this past January went to Los Angeles, organizations like Heal the Bay and other organizations to deal with climate change adaptation. Because we know that even if we just went dark tomorrow and stopped all energy use, we've already released enough carbon to heat up the earth for another 100 years. We need to start adapting to that fact. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for being here. I'm very honored to have
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Mr.
Okay, the major problem in California is the employment. We are experiencing in California over 9% in unemployment today. Now, unemployment breaks down into 2 parts. There's government and there's private industry. And what's happening is that the government jobs are really taking up a lot of the work that's going on in California. In many cases, we don't know the unemployment is in the government sector. This is the most important district in California. The man holding that position has held it for, 40 years? 40 years. What are you going to do about the unemployment.
That's good.
And the second one is for Miss Williamson. If you're an independent, you don't appear on the Democratic or Republican primary. So I don't know what happens to you.
So in California, and she can answer this too, in California, they call it the guerrilla primary, different than any other state. Everyone is on your ballot. It's unlike it was growing up and for me, where it was just you voted, if you were a Republican, you voted for a Republican in the primary, and if you were a Democrat, you voted for a Democrat. That does not exist in California anymore. The open primary allows you to vote for anybody. So you could vote for any of us in the primary, or a Republican if that's your party and what you're interested in. But it is an open primary, so you can vote for any of us there. And you know, I think one of the comments you made, they do include in the in the numbers for unemployment government, and in fact, in some of the numbers, and I know even from where I was in the city of Los Angeles, where we reduced the number of employees, that was part of the reduction overall. But I think it is important, one of the other questions you asked, which was that Henry Waxman, I don't think he has 150 staff. I know locally he only has about 5 or so. Depends if you are in the majority of the Congress, if you are in the majority and you chair a committee, then you get staff for that committee. The Democrats are not in the majority, so they don't have the same kind of staffing at that level, and so it's a smaller number there. I know one of you, I have not only a family business, I know I talked about many of my skills, but one of the skills I have is I drive a forklift. So I know if I'm ever unemployed, I could drive a forklift. And to do that, I learned from my mom and dad many years ago, and my grandfather. But the question is about the economy, and we talked a little bit about it earlier in the question that the gentleman asked about how we grow the economy. It means encouraging businesses. It means encouraging those businesses we want to see in the future. So if you talk about climate change and you talk about the environment, one of the things that's very important is to make sure that we have renewable energy. That is of the future. That we have not only solar energy, all the things that are really important, and we have to be able to encourage that. We need to keep the entertainment industry here. We need to make sure that we have the kinds of jobs that when people graduate from college that are going to be here in this region. How many of you remember that we had Fortune 500 companies in this region, right? We had a lot of Fortune 500 companies. A lot of banks were located here. Again, things that we had, Lockheed Martin was here. They've all moved, as this gentleman was saying, they've all moved to other places. They're being recruited. I want to be, along with, I think, all of the elected officials in this area, somebody who says we want the jobs here, and there's a reason for it. And you were right, this is the most important seat, I believe, in the entire country. One, because of its pristine beauty. If you just look out here, there's nothing like it, where it goes all the way from Palos Verdes up to Calabasas and to Malibu as well, across to Beverly Hills. But, you know, we've talked a lot about money and politics and how horrible that is. Guess what? California, Los Angeles, the ATM for the rest of the country. Everybody comes here. You read in the paper which elected officials come here and they ask for money, and then they go back to their state and they go back to Congress, and they're never ever supportive of the things that are important to us. And I was talking to some people in the last few years and saying, how do we use the power of the fact that they all come out to visit us here for good? To talk about when we have something that says we want local control, we want to make local hires. Senator, I'll just use this as an example. Senator Franken, who came out a few weeks ago, Senator Franken, when we have this bill, we want you to have your support on this because it's really important to us. We have more Congress members than, I think it's equal to the state of New York. We should be working together to get the resources here for the programs that we need, so that we have a strong economy in this region. And that means a strong port, that means a strong economy related to to technology, it means entertainment jobs, and it means the jobs of the future. And so I'm just building upon the answer that I gave a little bit earlier, but I appreciate your comment, and I think having a good economy addresses a lot of the issues that are important and the services that are necessary.
Just to add to what Wendy was saying about the open primary, which is very important. The top 2 vote getters on June 3rd then go into the November election. So whichever of us, the top 2 vote getters, go there. And everybody will get the same ballot. It's not like the Democrats will only have the Democrats on your ballot and the Republicans only. So all of you will get the same ballot. So that's important, and there's no calculus for splitting a vote or anything like that. In terms of this issue about the economy, you know, Woody was just saying that people from all over the country come to California to get people to donate. Well, they're not coming to the unemployed in California. They're not coming they're not coming because they really want to talk to Californians. They're coming because we have so many rich people who can donate to their campaigns. We're all very happy about that. We're all excited that people can grow wealth and do well in America. That's a beautiful thing. The problem is how many millions of people fall into poverty every day through no fault of their own. It would take $3.6 trillion to repair the infrastructure of the United States. We have bridges, we have roads, we have so much that needs repair. So this goes down to the basic values, and that to me is the point in this campaign. The issue is a values issue. Who does this government serve? Because if this government saw its role as being not only the protector of individual liberty, which is very, very important, but equally important, the care for the common good, then they would be open to a conversation that does not take place in America today the way it should. And that is for a new deal. That is for a government funding of programs so that you can get people to work. Why is it that Franklin Roosevelt did it and it was called greatness? And if somebody talks about it today, it's called socialism. We can now repair the infrastructure in the United States. It would take $3.6 trillion, put people to work. Put people to work here in California on a Green New Deal. This is not government entitlement and so forth. It's simply giving a robust, you know, give yourself it's like in a car when you give it a, what's the word I want? A battery charge?
Jump.
Yeah, you give it a jump start. We could give it a jump start. People could be put to work. I'll tell you why those people are unemployed. Because we have a government that in ways that it does not admit, does not really give a damn. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Are you aware that there is a tremendous problem in California of foreign money coming in, buying up properties, and evicting old-time tenants from the buildings?
so that the influence of foreign money to buy property to evict people.
And are able and are allowed to evict old-time tenants. This is happening very much in Santa Monica, and as I understand, it is happening also in other states. Another quick question. Do you, Wendy, not think that if Hollywood would clean up their, what they call entertainment, that perhaps they would not have to move out? It is really very insulting and damaging to this society how they are entertaining us with violence, with vulgarity, constant murders and killings. That's not entertainment.
There is a movement to change for a constitutional amendment. It's moved to amend, and I don't hear anything about it. I've been reading reports that it is popular in a lot of conservative areas. And when I talk to people who are running for office now, they don't even know about it. I mean, what is it? That's a mystery to me. Maybe you can talk on that.
What's the
and another thing is,
question?
and with this ruling with the Roberts case, it's so interesting. It's been a long time since I had a constitutional law course, but I don't know why people can't get into to examining Breyer's and Roberts' opinion. It was so interesting to examine. And I think, I like to see the media is so controlled by big corporations because the corporations run the media. They control the media.
And I think healthy shame is important. And I believe that it's important that we have a serious conversation about for instance, the glamorization and sexualization of violence in our society. Everywhere you go, there's a billboard with some young girl looking really sexy with a gun in her hand. That's terrible. Having said that, and even though I feel strongly about these things as a citizen, we do want to be really careful. We don't want your government coming in on that. We don't want government censoring any of that. So it's important that we be clear as citizens about keeping those two conversations separate. In terms of what you were saying, sir, in terms of a few corporations that dominate the story that the media tells, this is largely due to the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which was one of the worst pieces of legislation ever in our nation's history. When we were children, the same company was not allowed to own the radio station and the newspaper and the television station because the variety of opinion was recognized to be important to a healthy functioning society. They used the internet as an excuse, and now you have what was predicted at the time, which is just a few corporations running the news. This is why stories that used to get somebody a Pulitzer Prize now gets that same reporter fired. So you're absolutely correct, and one of the things that I'd be very interested in doing in Congress is standing for the repeal of the Telecommunications Act. And I don't remember the first thing you said, or I'd answer that too.
Well, the first thing did you want me to?
No, I just don't remember.
Move to amend. Bobby.
I'll start with it because I think we're on the same page on this, which is, and you talked about the standing up against what has happened in a Supreme Court, particularly on the money and the constitutional amendment. And I think you hear from all of us, we agree with that. Actually, the city of Los Angeles, and I supported it, took a vote in this last election a year ago, specifically saying the same thing that they're now trying to do in the state. We were kind of the leader in that, and people are now following in that direction. I think as well that we're very similar on that, there is a freedom of speech, but there also is about making sure that you are listening to the people and what is unacceptable and being able to do that. I mean, look, it used to be that everyone smoked on TV, and there was a big effort to say we don't want to see that happening because it changes and kids are watching it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a power of one. Go back to this woman as how you can start this. I met a young man last night who's 15 years old who worked to make sure that the movie theaters, he's deaf, had an ability for him to go see those movies, and he in Santa Monica pushed that. There's a way to do that. So the power of one is really great. I think the other, on the evicting, I'm very familiar because I worked at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I worked on the issue of fair housing. I worked with this city and other places to make sure that there's laws in place to protect those that otherwise would be evicted. If they are not, please give me your phone number. We can work with the city of Santa Monica and other places, but that's something I worked very hard to make sure that we have affordable housing for seniors, for veterans. It seems criminal to me that anyone who has served our country is homeless and doesn't have a place to go.
7,000 in Los Angeles.
It's unbelievable. We are the homeless capital, unfortunately, this region of the country, and I can talk later about some of the things I did on veterans. I want to see if there was one other thing that that was asked. I think that may have been it. Do you want me to just to close really quick? And
Yes, please.
Okay, so we will
Take
let
a
you.
little wrap-up statement.
Thank you very much for being here again on a Friday afternoon and all being here. I think we agree that the dysfunction of Washington, D.C. and the dysfunction, I believe, even of Sacramento. I mean, you can look at the paper today and not see every day that corruption and dysfunction exist in those two places. I want to go to Congress because as city controller, that's part of what I did, was I highlighted where there was waste and fraud and abuse, where there were problems, how we could ensure that there wasn't that kind of corruption. But I want to do more than just highlight something. I want to do more than just complain. I want to do something. I want to fight and deliver. I want to fight and deliver on the issues for seniors and for environment and for, yes, job creation and getting dollars here for resources that we deserve in this community. Because it is about our future. And so each of you are good voters. I bet all of you vote in every election, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, very confident.
It's important. There's going to be a low turnout. Whether you vote for me or someone else, of course I want you to vote for me, but I want you to vote most
But
of
there
all.
are two of us, so you can vote for both of us.
That's right. And the importance, my father unfortunately has passed away, but my dad was the first person in line every single time the election day. And in fact, he had passed away, and I went to go vote the next time, and the woman said to me, I haven't seen your dad yet. He's the first person that always is here. And I had to say to him, unfortunately my father died suddenly, but I know I'm here and I'm almost the first person. Okay, I missed being the first person because I was a little later, but he would get there right at 7 a.m. and say, I'm gonna vote. It is something that people have lost their lives for, to give us all the right to vote and to stand up even if we agree or we disagree. My 10-and-a-half-year-old is in Washington, D.C. right now. Now, first trip away from mom and dad, and on Monday, I don't know who was, more upset, my husband or I, that he was going. He just kind of waved to us and walked onto the airplane.
What's he doing?
He is there on a program called People to People, and it's a leadership program. And so he's been there all week, and we FaceTimed, which I've learned how to do. Okay, I don't know, something new for me. We FaceTimed. But he said to me, Mom, I have learned so much about what people did for me and how people fought so that I could be here today, because he went to all the memorials. And so when I think about being in Washington, I think about it's an honor and a privilege to serve. It's an honor and privilege to represent you. And I'm asking you today to give me that honor and privilege to serve you, to be here, and to be able to work with you to make it a better community and a better country. Thank you very, very much.
I actually think if Wendy Greuel is Congresswoman, she'd be a good Congresswoman. And I think if Ted Lieu is Congressman, he'd be a good Congressman. And I think there are other people in this race who'd be good Congresspeople as well. But we need to do more than perpetuate the system, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
We need to do more than perpetuate the system. We need to interrupt the system. We need more than good Congresspeople. We need a game changer.
Yes.
We need a game change conversation. And I believe that that is why I'm running as an independent. I've been a Democrat all my life. But I'm sorry, I cannot toe the corporatist, militaristic line of either major party anymore. They talk about how different the parties are, but the truth of the matter is underneath, in a very sinister way, how similar they are. Also, I don't know if it was Ted or Wendy who mentioned here today something very true. The deepest things for Americans to be concerned about right now are not left-right issues. We have shrinking civil liberties, we have expanding corporate influence, and we have domestic surveillance. It's going to be very difficult for anybody shackled by the party doctrines and dictates today to really be able to bring that up on the way it needs to be brought up, because they are so beholden to those moneyed interests. I have announced that I'm not taking any corporate PAC money, no special interest PAC money, no lobbyist money. We need to stop this. We need to change this. And I feel that at this time in our history, it's important to remember the political parties were not mentioned in our founding documents. And George Washington warned us against them in his farewell address. Abolition did not come from a major party. The suffrage movement did not come from a major party. Civil rights movement did not come from a major party. These were people's movements. Their ideas were enacted by major parties later. Today we need a people's movement. And I can't think of a better place than here in District 33 of California, where we don't do same old, same old. We don't perpetuate old systems here. That's not what we do. We start new conversations here, absolutely clear that what we start here becomes a national trend within 5 years. We need a national trend of independent voices who are basing their platforms on one underlying theme, getting the money out of politics. And if you give me, I agree with Wendy, and I'm sure we feel the same way. She said she would feel it an honor and a privilege. I would feel it an honor and a privilege also. I'm honored and privileged just to be here, a part of this process. Either one of us you sent to Washington will be good, but I stand for a game change, and I hope you can see it.
Thank you very much. Please sign the card for Nat Travis, who's recuperating, and please sign the card during the break. We're going to take a 5-10 minute break. Thank you. Thank you.